The white lace of the wedding gown was heavy with the filth of the soul gutters, a ruined shroud for a life Naya refused to live. She sprinted through the torrential downpour, the fabric tearing against her thighs, her obsidian-toned skin slick with rain and cold sweat. Behind her, the rhythmic wail of sirens and the screech of tires echoed through the industrial district. Junho's men, hunting their master's stolen property. To the cruel underboss, she wasn't a bride. She was a trophy he had intended to break before the honeymoon even began. "There! Catch the bitch!" a voice roared through the dark. Naya's lungs burned like they were filled with acid. Her bare feet were bleeding, staining the white silk of her hem as she rounded a corner into a dead-end alley. Panic, cold and paralyzing, clawed at her throat until she saw it. A sleek, matte black sedan, idling at the far end, its headlights cutting through the mist like the eyes of a predator. Without thinking, fueled only by the primal need to survive, she lunged for the rear door. It was unlocked. She tumbled into the plush leather interior, gasping for air, her chest heaving against the tight corset of her dress. "Drive!" she choked out, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. "Please, just drive. I'll give you anything. Just don't let them take me back." The car didn't move. A heavy, suffocating silence filled the cabin, smelling of expensive sandalwood and gun oil. "Anything?" a voice drawled, a low, melodic baritone that made the hair on her arms stand up. Naya froze. She slowly turned her head and looked into the shadows of the back seat. Baek Kyung-min sat there, his long legs crossed, a tablet glowing in his lap. He didn't look like a savior. He looked like a god of death carved from stone. His sharp jawline was shadowed with stubble, and his eyes, dark and predatory, swept over her trembling, dark-skinned form with a clinical, terrifying interest. Outside, Junho's SUVs screeched to a halt at the mouth of the alley. Armed men spilled out, flashlights scanning the shadows. Naya let out a whimpering sob, shrinking away from the window, her hand instinctively reaching out to grab the sleeve of the stranger's charcoal silk suit. Kyung-min looked down at her small, dark hand on his arm, then back at the window. A slow, dangerous smile pulled at his lips. He knew exactly who she was. She was the diamond of the Goryeo underworld, the woman his greatest rival had spent millions to secure. And here she was, bleeding and broken, begging for his mercy. "You're in the wrong car, little bride," he murmured, his voice a low caress that felt like a blade against her skin. "I don't do charity. And Junho, he doesn't like it when I touch his things." "Please," she whispered, her amber eyes wide and desperate. "He'll kill me." Kyung-min leaned forward, his face inches from hers. He could smell the rain on her skin and the terror in her breath. He reached out, his thumb catching a stray tear on her cheek, his touch surprisingly steady. "He won't kill you," Kyung-min promised, his gaze darkening with a sudden possessive fire. "Because if he wants you back, he has to go through me, and nobody survives that. But remember, Naya, the price for my protection is everything." He tapped the glass partition. "Go," he commanded the driver. The sedan roared to life, lunging forward and scattering Junho's men like autumn leaves. Naya sank back into the seat, the reality of her situation hitting her like a physical blow. She had escaped the devil, only to be claimed by the Shadow King. The black sedan didn't stop until the neon sprawl of the city had faded into the jagged silhouettes of the mountains. They arrived at a fortress of glass and steel, perched on a cliffside, a place that felt more like a vault than a home. Kyung-min didn't wait for the guards. He stepped out and rounded the car, pulling the door open. Naya hesitated, her ruined wedding dress spilling out like a blood-stained cloud. Without a word, he reached in and hauled her out, his grip on her arm firm enough to steady her trembling legs. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of rain and luxury. Kyung-min led her into a vast, minimalist living area where the walls were floor-to-ceiling windows. He finally let go of her, moving to a sideboard to pour 2 fingers of amber liquid into a crystal glass. He downed it in one go, his eyes never leaving her. "The dress has to go," he said, his voice flat. "It's a beacon, and frankly, it's an insult to my eyes." Naya clutched the torn lace at her chest, her dark skin shimmering under the recessed lighting. "You said there was a price. What do you want from me?" Kyung-min set the glass down with a sharp clack. He crossed the room with the silent grace of a leopard, stopping only when he was close enough for Naya to feel the heat radiating from his chest. He was a head taller, a wall of tailored silk and cold intent. He reached out, his long fingers trailing down the side of her neck, tracing the line where her deep-toned skin met the white fabric. "Junho wanted you as a trophy to display," he murmured, his thumb hooking into the edge of her corset. "I want you as a ghost. You stay in this house. You eat what I provide. You sleep where I tell you. To the world, Naya is dead. To me, you are the only leverage that matters." "I'm a prisoner again," she whispered, her voice cracking. "A prisoner would be back in that alley," he countered, his gaze dropping to her lips. "With me, you are a secret. But make no mistake, I don't protect what I don't own. If I keep you, I keep all of you." He leaned in, his lips brushing her ear, his scent of sandalwood and danger intoxicating. "Strip. There are clothes in the next room. If you're still wearing that white rag in 5 minutes, I'll cut it off you myself." He stepped back, leaving her cold and shaking. Naya watched him walk away, realizing she hadn't just changed cars. She had traded a cruel master for a brilliant, beautiful monster. The peace of the mountain fortress lasted exactly 4 hours. Naya had barely scrubbed the grime of the city from her skin and changed into a charcoal silk robe, one of Kyung-min's, when the silent alarm pulsed a rhythmic red against the obsidian walls. The Shadow King didn't panic. He moved with a chilling, calculated speed. Before Naya could ask what was happening, he had gripped her waist and shoved her toward a hidden elevator. "He found us," she gasped, her heart hammering against her ribs. "He found a tracker he thinks I didn't see," Kyung-min corrected, his voice a low growl. He checked a sleek black submachine gun, the metallic click echoing in the confined space. "But he's faster than I anticipated. We move. Now." They didn't head for the main gates. Instead, they descended into a subterranean garage where a modified armored SUV sat waiting. Kyung-min threw her into the passenger seat, his hands flying over the ignition as the garage door hissed open to a world of blinding rain and headlights. As they roared out, the night exploded. 3 silver SUVs, Junho's signature fleet, swerved into their path, tires screaming on the wet pavement. What followed was a dance of death. Kyung-min drove like a man who had no fear of the abyss, weaving the heavy vehicle through narrow mountain passes at speeds that made Naya's stomach drop. Bullets shattered the side mirror and spiderwebbed the reinforced glass. Naya huddled in her seat, her dark skin pale with terror, her eyes fixed on the man beside her. Kyung-min steered with one hand, the other reaching over to pin her down whenever they veered too sharply. "Stay down," he commanded, as a bullet whizzed past his head. Suddenly, Kyung-min slammed on the brakes, the SUV skidding into a 180-degree turn. He leaned out the window, firing a precise burst into the lead vehicle's tire. The silver SUV flipped, a chaotic mess of metal and sparks, blocking the narrow road for the others. For a split second, they were airborne as Kyung-min launched the car over a grassy embankment into a hidden access road. The silence that followed was deafening, broken only by the panting of their breath. They were safe, for now. Kyung-min pulled the car under a dense canopy of trees and killed the lights. He turned to Naya, his face splattered with a drop of oil, his eyes burning with an adrenaline-fueled fire. He reached out, his hand sliding behind her neck to pull her close. "You're still breathing," he whispered, his thumb brushing her lower lip. "You're insane," she breathed, but her hand didn't push him away. Instead, she gripped his shirt, the terror of the chase morphing into a sudden electric heat. The man was a monster, but he was her monster. The secondary safe house was a stark contrast to the mountain fortress. Tucked into a nondescript apartment block in the heart of a bustling district, it was small, shadowed, and smelled of cedar and rain. Kyung-min didn't turn on the lights, leaving the room bathed in the flickering amber glow of the city's neon signs. He dropped his weapon on the kitchen counter and turned to Naya, who was still trembling, the oversized silk robe slipping from one of her dark, elegant shoulders. "Sit," he commanded, gesturing to the edge of the bed. He disappeared for a moment, returning with a first aid kit and a basin of warm water. Naya watched him, mesmerized by the way his lethal hands moved with such clinical precision. He knelt between her knees, a position of strange intimacy for a man who claimed to only value her as leverage. He took her foot in his palm, his long fingers cool against her obsidian skin, and began to carefully clean the cuts she had sustained during her flight from the altar. "You should have worn shoes if you planned on running from a wolf," he murmured, his voice low and vibrating through the quiet room. "I didn't plan it," Naya whispered, wincing as he dabbed antiseptic onto a deep scratch. "I just knew I couldn't stay. Jun-ho, he's a butcher." Kyung-min's grip tightened almost imperceptibly on her ankle. He looked up, his dark eyes searching hers. "He is a child playing with fire. I am the fire." He moved his hands upward, his thumbs tracing the curves of her calves, his touch lingering longer than necessary. The tension in the room shifted, the adrenaline of the chase cooling into a thick, magnetic heat. Naya reached out, her fingers tentatively brushing the hair away from his forehead. She expected him to flinch or growl, but he leaned into her touch, his eyes fluttering closed for a fraction of a second. In that silence, the hierarchy of captor and prisoner dissolved. He wasn't just the Shadow King, and she wasn't just a runaway bride. They were two predators recognizing the same hunger. He stood slowly, his body hovering over hers, pinning her against the pillows with his shadow. He reached for the tie of her robe, his knuckles brushing the sensitive skin of her stomach. "You're safe here, Naya," he promised, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper that sent shivers down her spine. "But don't mistake my protection for kindness. I'm keeping you for myself." The storm outside the apartment was nothing compared to the silence that sat between them. Kyung-min remained hovering over Naya, his presence a suffocating weight of silk and steel. The neon light from the street filtered through the blinds, casting golden stripes across Naya's dark, velvet skin, making her look like a goddess trapped in a cage of light. She could hear the heavy thrum of his heart, or perhaps it was her own, echoing the primal rhythm of the city below. You look at me like you're waiting for the blow to fall, Kyung-min rasped, his hand sliding from her waist to the curve of her jaw. His thumb traced the fullness of her lower lip, pulling it down just enough to reveal the white flash of her teeth. Junho is a coward who breaks what he cannot control. I don't want to break you, Naya. I want to consume you. The honesty in his voice was the final tether to snap. Naya didn't pull away. Instead, she arched into him, her fingers tangling in the hair at the nape of his neck. The silk robe slipped further, pooling around her elbows, leaving her exposed to his burning gaze. Do it, she whispered, her voice a daring challenge. Claim what you saved. Kyung-min didn't hesitate. He claimed her mouth with a hunger that was desperate and absolute, a collision of two souls forged in the dark. It wasn't the tentative kiss of a savior, but the possessive brand of a king. He moved with a slow, agonizing deliberation, his hands exploring the landscape of her body, as if he were memorizing a map of his new kingdom. Every touch was a vow, every breath a surrender. As he laid her back against the pillows, the world beyond the door ceased to exist. There were no hitmen, no debts, and no runaway brides. There was only the heat of his skin against hers, the striking contrast of his pale hands against the rich obsidian of her thighs. Kyung-min was meticulous, his movements a symphony of restraint and passion, ensuring that Naya felt every ounce of his obsession. He worshipped her with a quiet intensity that turned her fear into fire, replacing the memory of Junho's cruelty with the reality of his own lethal devotion. In the height of their passion, Naya realized she wasn't hiding anymore. She had finally been found. The afterglow of their union was shattered by the rhythmic, heavy thud of a battering ram against the reinforced front door. The apartment, once a sanctuary of amber light and silk, transformed instantly back into a war zone. Kyung-min was off the bed in a single, fluid motion, his bare back a map of tension and scars as he reached for the pistol on the nightstand. Stay in the bathroom. Lock the door. Do not come out until you hear my voice, he commanded, his tone stripped of the warmth that had filled it moments ago. He didn't look back, but his hand lingered on her shoulder for a heartbeat longer than necessary, a silent promise of return. The door splintered with a final, violent crash. Junho stepped into the foyer, flanked by 4 men with drawn weapons. He looked disheveled, his wedding tuxedo stained and rumpled, his face twisted into a mask of humiliated rage. He didn't look at Kyung-min. His eyes scanned the room with a feverish desperation, hunting for the woman he considered his property. Give her to me, Beck, Junho spat, his voice trembling with a dangerous edge. You've had your fun. You've insulted my family, my honor. Hand her over, and maybe I'll let you keep your head. Kyung-min stood in the center of the room, shirtless and lethal, the gun held at his side with deceptive ease. He looked at Junho not as a rival, but as an infestation. Honor? Kyung-min let out a low, dry chuckle that carried the chill of a grave. You lost your honor the moment you tried to chain a woman who was never meant for you. She isn't a debt, Junho, and she certainly isn't yours. She's my wife by contract, Junho screamed, stepping forward. The contract was for a bride, Kyung-min said, his voice dropping to a deadly whisper as he raised his weapon, the laser sight centering on Junho's forehead. But she didn't run to me to be a bride. She ran to be a queen, and a queen belongs to the man who can actually keep her alive. The air in the room was electric, a single twitch away from a massacre. From the shadows of the hallway, Naya watched, her heart thundering. She saw the way Kyung-min stood between her and her past, not as a wall, but as a shield. Junho's men hesitated, smelling the absolute certainty of death radiating from the Shadow King. Kyung-min wasn't just defending a woman, he was defending his throne. The tension in the room was a living thing, a coiled serpent waiting for the first heartbeat of hesitation. Junho's face was a grotesque mask of entitlement, his eyes darting toward the hallway where he sensed Naya was hiding. He didn't care about love. He cared about the loss of his investment. "You think you can protect her forever, Beck?" He sneered, his finger tightening on the trigger of his own weapon. "She's a fugitive. My family will hunt her to the ends of the earth." In the silence of the bathroom, Naya looked at her reflection in the darkened mirror. She saw the woman who had fled in white lace, and the woman who now wore the Shadow King's silk. The fear that had defined her for years suddenly felt like an old, ill-fitting garment. She didn't want to be the reason Kyung-min bled. She wanted to be the reason Junho fell. She didn't stay in the shadows. Naya stepped into the living room, her dark skin luminous against the charcoal robe, her head held high. The sudden appearance of the diamond froze the room. Junho's eyes lit up with a sick greed. "Naya, come here," he commanded, his voice trembling. "Come back to your master." She didn't move toward him. She moved toward Kyung-min, stepping flush against his side. She reached out, her fingers wrapping around the grip of the spare pistol tucked into the back of his waistband. Kyung-min didn't stop her. He adjusted his stance, opening his guard to include her. "I am not a debt to be collected, Junho," Naya said, her voice steady and cold as a winter stream. "And I am certainly not yours. You didn't buy a wife. You bought a revolution." Junho roared, a sound of pure, unadulterated ego snapping. He raised his gun, but Naya was faster. She didn't fire to kill, not yet, but the roar of the weapon in her hand shattered the glass of the sideboard behind him. The distraction was all Kyung-min needed. He moved with the speed of a lightning strike, a blur of motion that ended with the butt of his gun colliding with Junho's jaw and his other hand disarming the underboss's lead guard. In seconds, the room was a wreckage of groaning men and broken pride. Kyung-min stood over a crumpled Junho, his foot heavy on the man's chest. He looked back at Naya, his eyes burning with a new, profound respect. He had saved her from the altar, but she had just saved herself from the ghost of her fear.